I didn't dive deep into Chinese surveillance in my last video, not only because it was not the point of the video, but also because as an American going anywhere right now, criticizing other governments is throwing stones from glass houses. In China, while the Strait of Hormuz was closed because our fuck-ass president decided to illegally start a war without even Congress, which is breaking our own laws on declaring war, not to mention just integrity and what he also said about not getting involved in foreign war. But with the topic of surveillance, I do not condone Chinese surveillance, but it does remind me of just like a month or two ago, my partner and I were in Berlin and we went to the Stasi Museum, which is the museum in the former Soviet headquarters in East Berlin that is about the Cold War and Stalin's role in it. And I remember saying to my partner as we went through the rooms and they talked about all of the surveillance and all of the ways that Stalin's soldiers collected information on people. I mean, they were making cameras disguised as car doors. They were going into people's houses and replicating keys so that they could get in and out, and planting cameras and everything. And I just looked at my partner and said, it's funny because, you know, the US doesn't have to do that because we just all voluntarily give it to Mark Zuckerberg anyway. And this is part of why all the TikTok drama a couple years ago about, oh no, it's going to be the Chinese have our data. When we were all like, but the US government hasn't done shit about Mark Zuckerberg repeatedly violating privacy. And so that's again why it feels like not something I condone, but throwing stones out of glass houses is, I think the US does a better job at the illusion of choice of getting, because Mark Zuckerberg uses tech that was invented by our military. We're good at the illusion of choice that you opt in, even if those terms change and they're very vague and they may or may not follow them and there may or may not be consequences. There aren't consequences, not for the billionaires. So when I am somewhere that has citizen surveillance, I am there as a guest and as an observer, and my obligations as a citizen, where I pay taxes, where I vote, are in the United States. So that is where I am hesitant to, I don't accept everything as good or truth. Like I said in the previous video, you know, the context always matters. Where I have the most power and obligation is in my home country, and that's why I'm always going to start there. It makes no sense for me as an American in the current world empire to go anywhere else in the world and tell them they need to change. It just doesn't make sense. As a student of the world, it is very interesting to go somewhere else and be like, well, we're doing that now, aren't we? And then just, you know, puts into perspective how young of a country we are. Now, I did have, we didn't bring up the surveillance while we were there, because again, we were guests, but a Chinese local we were talking to brought it up on her own, and she was like, you know, we're not really bothered by the surveillance, you know, because we really care about the outcome. And the outcome right now is it keeps us safe. And if that changes, then we'll have a problem with it. Now, is she one person in a massive country with a huge population, I mean truly huge population, representative? Probably not. But it was interesting that she brought it up and she said that, and that was her take on it, was if it starts being weaponized, then I'll have a problem with it. But as of right now, it's extremely safe. And that is something that was really, I mean, while we were very aware that wherever we were likely being monitored, and I posted a video of kind of a silly, my partner, who's a first-generation student, first-generation UK citizen from Albania, refugee background, freaked out a little bit about turned-down service in a 5-star hotel because he thought like the surveillance, like people had been in our room, and I was like, no, baby, we just not rich folk. We're not used to people putting our slippers out for us. While we were very aware of that, it is really safe in China. Like twice, because we were traveling so much and I had so many bags, twice I left my phone somewhere and nobody touched it. Nobody messes with it. And because cameras are there and my phone isn't much good to them with the Great Firewall, a Western phone, but in general, like, it's so safe, it's so clean. And I think culturally there's more of it, I perceive a respect for your surroundings and people, and that could be out of fear. It could also be out of collectivism. I'm not sure. Probably a combo. But it was so safe to the point to where near the end of our trip there, we were there about 3 weeks, I met a young woman who was finishing her undergrad in China and was moving to London for grad school. And I was, congratulations, feel free to hit us up when you're in London. And also keep in mind that they have a major phone snatching problem in London. It's not as safe as China. So, maybe get one of those. It's very common to wear like the wrist attachment to your phone in London because people will just grab your phone. And I was like, granted, I'm saying that not judgmentally about England because, in my country, children get unalived in schools. And she was like, oh, well, I actually did an internship in Chicago. So, yeah, I'm under no naivety there. And I was like, queen. As for the Tiananmen Square massacre, which I did call a massacre, so I'm not sure why y'all are like, oh, she's supporting it. It's not that I'm condoning these things. It's that I also know that I live in a country that is actively pulling history out of our books when it never had non-whitewash history to begin with. Do you know about the Tulsa massacre? Do you care about that as much as you do about the Tiananmen Square? And it's not that either of those are comparable, but it is that when you are an American citizen, where you have control is in the States. We don't have it's impossible to find information on things like the Tulsa massacre. We don't have that kind of censorship, but we do have y'all openly saying, well, we can't teach about that in school because it'll make white kids uncomfortable. And that is some pansy ass shit. Again, U.S. propaganda in censorship is just different. It's instead of a blatant wall of no, you can't find this, it's you have to even know to look for it. We are going to structurally set it up so that you may or may not know that. Stones and glass houses. The point of the video was that the context matters, not just the identity. And I gave a whole example talking about Catholics during the Inquisition in Spain, during Catholics under English rule in Ireland, because it's easier for Americans to hate on Catholics than it is to have empathy towards race, unfortunately. But if you want to look at a clearer example, you can be angry that the Chinese government, we know COVID came out of Wuhan. But if you are not also angry that our officials, the ones we are responsible for electing, also knew and didn't tell us and changed their socks around and didn't prepare or take care of us during that time, then you're missing the point. And if you use that time of being irritated with the Chinese government to treat Asian American people or Asian people as dirty or less than, or justify the violence towards them during that time, then you're racist. That doesn't mean that you're holding China accountable. And where we really have obligations, it doesn't mean that you don't stay abreast of global politics. It doesn't mean that you don't try to understand the conflicts or have a say in choosing the leaders and how they're going to handle it. But again, it's in choosing our leaders. So, all in all, it's about not throwing stones in glass houses. Part of what fascinates me so much as a class researcher is looking at how the same systems, or how different systems all try to enforce power hoarding, the ones that do it better and the ones who distribute the power more equally. It's our isms and our xenophobia that have us, and defensiveness that have us pointing fingers elsewhere instead of looking at what is within our realm of control.